A German shepherd, waiting to be euthanized, cried in his kennel at the shelter. Then it happened. Scene 1. Rex's despair in the shelter. The cold metal bars of the kennel pressed against Rex's body as he curled into himself, trying to disappear. The shelter was eerily silent except for the occasional whimpers and howls of other dogs, their desperate cries filling the empty halls. But Rex remained quiet. He had long stopped barking, stopped trying to get anyone's attention. He had learned the hard way that it didn't matter. No one came for him. For weeks, he had watched as people walked past his cage, their eyes briefly scanning him before moving on to the younger, more energetic dogs. No one wanted a large, scarred German shepherd with a history of aggression, or so his record said. In truth, Rex was not aggressive. He was terrified. Every loud noise made him flinch. Every raised hand sent a shiver down his spine. The scars on his coat told the story of a painful past, but no one at the shelter had asked, and perhaps no one cared. His time was running out. Rex had been on death row for days now. The shelter was overcrowded, and difficult cases like his had no future. There was no space, no patience for a dog that flinched at every touch. The decision had been made. Tomorrow, he would be euthanized. He wouldn't fight it. He was too tired, too broken. As the staff cleaned up for the night, Rex barely lifted his head. His once bright amber eyes had dulled, his spirit drained. The other dogs whined and barked, still hopeful that someone would come for them, but Rex had accepted his fate. He let out a quiet whimper, not a cry for attention, just a sigh of resignation. Outside, the night stretched on, cold and indifferent. The moon cast a faint glow through the small barred window of his kennel, illuminating the worn concrete floor where he lay. His body ached, not just from the physical scars, but from the loneliness, the endless waiting. Tomorrow, he would be gone, and no one would remember him. But fate had other plans. Somewhere across town, in a small apartment, a woman named Emily was scrolling through her phone, unaware that her life, and Rex's, was about to change forever. Scene 2. Emily discovers Rex's story across town in a small apartment dimly lit by the soft glow of a bedside lamp. Emily sat on her couch, absent-mindedly scrolling through her phone. The weight of exhaustion clung to her shoulders, the kind that came from long hours at work and the quiet loneliness that settled in when the world outside fell silent. Emily was a veterinary technician, someone who had dedicated her life to caring for animals. Yet, despite her deep love for them, she had never adopted a pet of her own. There were always excuses. Her apartment was too small. Her work schedule was too demanding. She wasn't sure if she had the patience or experience to care for a dog, especially one with a troubled past. But that night, something felt different. As her thumb lazily flicked through posts on social media, an image caught her eye. A grainy, dimly lit photo of a German shepherd curled up in the corner of a metal cage. His head rested on his paws, his body tucked tightly as if trying to make himself invisible. But it was his eyes that stopped her. They weren't the eyes of an aggressive dog. They weren't even the eyes of a dog who still held on to hope. They were hollow, defeated, resigned to a fate he knew he couldn't escape. Her chest tightened as she read the caption beneath the image. Rex, 5 years old, needs a home by tomorrow or he will be euthanized. Emily's heart pounded. She had seen countless dogs in shelters before, but something about Rex gripped her in a way she couldn't explain. It wasn't just sadness, it was urgency. A silent plea that reached through the screen and wrapped around her heart, refusing to let go. She stared at the photo, her finger hovering over the screen. You can't save them all. She had heard those words countless times before, whispered by colleagues, spoken by shelter staff, muttered by those who had seen too much suffering to believe in miracles. But as she looked at Rex's photo, the phrase felt empty. Maybe she couldn't save them all, but she could save him. Without thinking, she tapped on the phone icon and dialed the shelter's number. It rang once, twice. No answer. She hesitated, then took a deep breath and left a message. Hi, my name is Emily. I saw your post about Rex. I know it's late, but I want to help. Please don't do anything until I come by tomorrow morning. She ended the call, her heart racing. What was she doing? She barely had time for herself, let alone a rescue dog with a history of trauma. What if he was too aggressive? What if she couldn't handle him? But none of those doubts mattered, because, for the first time in a long time, she felt something stronger than fear, determination. She glanced at the time. Nearly midnight. If she was going to do this, she needed to be at the shelter first thing in the morning. Emily set her alarm for dawn, knowing she wouldn't sleep much anyway. As she curled up in bed, her mind raced with 1,000 possibilities. But one thought drowned out the rest. Rex doesn't know it yet, but tomorrow, his life is going to change. Meanwhile, back at the shelter, Rex lay in the same curled position, his breathing slow and steady. The moonlight cast a pale glow across his fur, highlighting the scars that marred his body. For the first time in weeks, he let out a deep sigh. Somewhere, deep inside him, something had shifted. Something told him his story wasn't over yet. This section captures Emily's emotional journey as she discovers Rex's story and makes the life-changing decision to save him. Let me know if you'd like any tweaks before moving to the next part. Scene 3. A timely rescue. The morning sun painted the sky in soft shades of orange and pink as Emily pulled into the shelter's parking lot. Her hands tightened around the steering wheel as she took a deep breath, steadying her nerves. This was it. There was no turning back now. She had barely slept. The image of Rex's hollow eyes had haunted her all night, filling her with both urgency and doubt. Was she really ready for this? What if he was too damaged, too afraid, too broken to trust her? But despite the swirling uncertainty in her mind, one thing remained clear. She had to try. Inside the shelter, the day had just begun. Staff members moved through the halls, feeding the dogs and cleaning their cages. To them, it was just another morning, another routine. But for Rex, today was supposed to be his last. Emily pushed open the shelter doors, the smell of disinfectant and damp fur hitting her instantly. She walked up to the front desk, her voice steady despite the nervous flutter in her chest. "Hi, my name is Emily. I called last night about Rex." The shelter manager, a stern-looking woman named Karen, glanced up from the paperwork in front of her. She studied Emily for a moment before checking the clock. "You're here early," she said, a hint of surprise in her tone. Then her expression softened into something resembling regret. "But I'm afraid you're too late. He's scheduled—" "Wait." Emily's voice was firm. "I'll take him." Karen hesitated. "Are you sure? Rex isn't an easy dog. He's been here for weeks and no one has been able to get close to him. He has a history of aggression." "I'm sure." Emily met Karen's gaze, her determination unwavering. "I know what I'm doing. Just give me a chance." For a long moment, Karen studied her, as if trying to gauge whether she was serious. Then, with a slow nod, she set down the clipboard. "All right," she said, motioning for Emily to follow. "Let me take you to him." The walk down the corridor felt longer than it was. The sound of barking and whining echoed around them, dogs pressing against the metal bars of their cages in excitement, hoping for a second glance. But Emily's focus was locked ahead, her heart pounding as they approached the farthest kennel. And there he was. Rex lay in the corner of his cage, curled tightly into himself. His ears twitched at the sound of approaching footsteps, but he didn't lift his head. His body was stiff, his breathing slow and steady. A dog who had given up. Karen sighed. "He's been like this for weeks. He won't even look at us anymore." Emily crouched down, her voice soft. "Hey, Rex." The sound of her voice made him stir, just slightly. His ears flicked, his eyes cracking open the tiniest bit. He didn't move, but something flickered in his expression. Curiosity, maybe? Emily extended her hand, keeping her movements slow, careful. "It's okay, boy. I'm here to take you home." For a long moment, Rex didn't react. Then hesitation. His nose twitched as he sniffed the air. His muscles tensed as if preparing for something. Emily held her breath. Then, slowly, so slowly it was almost imperceptible, Rex shifted. He didn't get up, didn't wag his tail, but his head lifted just slightly, his dull eyes meeting hers for the first time. "Good boy," Emily whispered, her voice breaking with emotion. Karen watched in silence. Then, with a sigh, she unlocked the cage door. "Be careful," she warned. "He's not exactly welcoming." Emily didn't move too quickly. She let Rex decide. The door was open. Freedom was within reach. But he had to make the choice. Rex hesitated. His body remained low, tense, as if waiting for something bad to happen. But Emily didn't push. She simply waited, patient and steady, giving him space to decide for himself. And then he took the first step. It was shaky, cautious, but it was a step. His paws met the cold concrete of the shelter floor, his body stiff with uncertainty. But he followed her. Karen exhaled slowly. "Well, I'll be damned." Emily smiled, though tears threatened to spill from her eyes. "Let's get him home." The drive to freedom. The car ride was silent, save for the soft hum of the engine. Rex lay in the back seat on a blanket Emily had placed there, his body curled up tightly, his eyes scanning the unfamiliar surroundings outside the window. Emily kept glancing at him through the rear-view mirror, her heart aching at the sight. He was still tense, still cautious, as if he didn't quite believe this was real. For all he knew, this was just another temporary stop before being locked in a cage again. She wanted to reassure him, to tell him that he was safe now, that she would never let anything happen to him. But she knew words weren't enough. Trust wasn't given. It was earned. As they pulled up in front of her modest apartment complex, Emily turned to him, her voice soft. "We're home, Rex." She opened the car door, giving him time to adjust before extending the leash. He hesitated, his ears twitching at the unfamiliar sounds. Then, cautiously, he stepped out, his paws touching the ground as he sniffed the air. His posture remained guarded, but there was something different now, a sliver of hope. Emily led him toward the building, moving slowly, careful not to startle him. Inside, the apartment was small but cozy. A dog bed sat in the corner, a set of bowls with fresh water and kibble waiting in the kitchen. Rex sniffed around, taking in the scents, his movements slow, hesitant. When he reached the dog bed, he sniffed it briefly before retreating to the far corner of the room, curling into a tight ball once again. Emily sighed, her chest tightening. She had expected this. She knew it would take time. Crouching down, she kept her voice soft. "It's okay, Rex. You're safe here." For a moment, his eyes softened, but he didn't move. Emily decided to give him space, retreating to the kitchen to prepare dinner. Maybe the smell of food would coax him out of his shell. Maybe, just maybe, this was the start of something new. This section captures the urgency of the rescue, the tension of their first meeting, and the cautious hope as Rex takes his first steps toward a new life. Let me know if you need any refinements. Rex's journey to healing. The first night in Emily's apartment was quiet. Too quiet. Rex lay curled up in the farthest corner of the living room, his body pressed tightly against the wall, his ears twitching at every sound. The space around him was warm, safe, but he didn't trust it yet. He didn't trust her yet. Emily sat a few feet away, cross-legged on the floor, watching him with quiet patience. She had read about traumatized dogs before, how pushing too soon could backfire, how trust wasn't something that could be forced. So she didn't try to pet him, didn't try to lure him closer. Instead, she simply sat there, her presence gentle, her voice soft whenever she spoke. "You're safe now, Rex." He didn't move. That first night, Emily barely slept. Every few hours, she checked on him, making sure he was still there, still breathing. And every time, she found him in the exact same position, curled up, eyes half open, watching her. By morning, nothing had changed. She sighed, running a hand through her messy hair as she sipped her coffee. This is going to take time. She wasn't naive. She knew rescuing Rex wouldn't be like in the movies. He wouldn't instantly become a happy, tail-wagging dog just because she had saved him. Trust wasn't given overnight, so she took it slow. For the first few days, she gave him space, letting him adjust on his own terms. She made sure he always had food and water, but never forced him to eat in front of her. She left his leash on, just in case he got scared and tried to bolt. And most of all, she was consistent. Every morning, she sat in the same spot with her laptop, working quietly as Rex lay in his corner. Every evening, she sat nearby, reading a book, letting him hear the sound of her voice. She never rushed him, never made sudden movements. And little by little, something started to change. It was subtle at first, a soft flick of his tail when she entered the room, the way his ears perked ever so slightly when she spoke, the way he no longer flinched when she moved too quickly. One evening, as she sat on the couch watching TV, she felt something against her leg. She froze. Looking down, she saw Rex's nose nudging her knee, his big, uncertain eyes meeting hers. Her heart skipped a beat. She didn't move, afraid that any sudden action would scare him away. Slowly, carefully, she reached out, her hand hovering just above his head before gently resting on his fur. "Good boy," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Rex didn't pull away. He stood there for a few moments before retreating back to his corner. But it didn't matter. The connection had been made. That night, as Emily lay in bed, she thought about everything he had been through. The scars, the fear, the years of neglect. But he was still here. He had survived. And for the first time since bringing him home, she truly believed that he was going to be okay. A new routine. Over the next few weeks, Emily and Rex slowly settled into a routine. He still didn't trust her completely, but the walls he had built around himself were beginning to crack. Each morning, when Emily woke up, she found Rex lying a little closer than the night before. He wasn't ready to sleep beside her yet, but he no longer hid in the farthest corner of the apartment. Each time she poured food into his bowl, he hesitated a little less before eating. Each time she sat on the couch, he watched her with just a little more curiosity. And then, one night, something incredible happened. Emily had just finished dinner and was washing dishes in the kitchen when she heard a sound she had never heard from him before. The soft, rhythmic thump of a tail wagging against the floor. She turned around slowly, barely breathing. Rex was lying in his usual spot, but this time his eyes weren't dull and lifeless. They were bright, curious. And his tail was wagging. It was small, hesitant, but it was there. Emily swallowed the lump in her throat, her hands shaking as she dried them with a towel. "Hey, buddy," she said softly. Rex didn't move toward her, but his tail thumped against the floor one more time. She knelt down, keeping her distance, but her voice was filled with warmth. "You're doing so good, Rex. I'm really proud of you." He blinked, his ears twitching, and for the first time since bringing him home, Emily saw hope in his eyes. It was slow, it was fragile, but it was there, and that was enough. This section captures the slow, delicate process of Rex beginning to trust Emily, highlighting small but powerful moments of healing. Let me know if you'd like any adjustments before moving to the next scene 5 shadows from the past. The air in Emily's apartment had shifted. Rex was changing, healing in ways she hadn't dared to hope for. He no longer cowered in the corner all day, and some nights he even slept closer to her bed. His tail wagged, a small, hesitant motion, but it was there. He had begun to trust her, but just as things were beginning to feel safe, the past came knocking. It started one night when Emily was tidying up after dinner. As she reached for her phone on the counter, something outside caught her eye. A car. Parked across the street, its engine off, its headlights dim. She frowned. It had been there for over an hour. Rex, who had been lying near the window, suddenly stiffened. His ears perked, and a low, rumbling growl built in his throat. Emily's stomach tightened. She had seen him react to sudden noises before, but this was different. This was instinct, a primal fear. She crouched beside him, gently running a hand over his back. "It's okay, buddy. You're safe here." But Rex didn't relax. His gaze was locked on the car, his body rigid. Emily's pulse quickened. She tried to brush it off. Maybe it was just a neighbor's car. Maybe someone had fallen asleep inside. But something about it didn't sit right. It felt like they were being watched. She pulled the curtain shut, but sleep didn't come easily that night. Every creak of the apartment, every shadow outside made her heart race. And through it all, Rex stayed alert, his ears twitching at the faintest sound. A terrifying truth. The next morning, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. She called the shelter, hoping to get more details on Rex's past. Maybe they could tell her where he had come from, why he seemed so haunted. Karen, the shelter manager, answered the phone with a sigh. "I was actually going to call you," she said. "We got a strange inquiry this morning. Someone was asking about Rex." Emily's breath caught. "Who?" They didn't give a name. Just asked if we still had him, where he was. A chill ran down Emily's spine. "What did you tell them?" "Nothing," Karen assured her. "I told them we couldn't disclose information on adopted animals. But Emily, something about the way they asked. It didn't feel right." Emily swallowed hard. "Do you know anything about where Rex came from?" There was a long pause. Then Karen spoke, her voice hesitant. "We don't have much on him. He was found as a stray, no microchip, but we heard rumours. Nothing confirmed, but some people say he came from a dog fighting operation." The words hit Emily like a punch to the gut. Dogfighting. Suddenly, everything made sense. The scars. The fear. The way he flinched at every raised hand. The way he had never barked at people, only growled in warning. Whoever had owned him before hadn't treated him like a pet. He had been a tool, a weapon. And now they wanted him back. Emily's grip tightened around her phone. "If they call again, don't tell them anything." Karen's voice was firm. "I won't." But Emily knew it wasn't over. Whoever was looking for Rex wasn't just asking. They were hunting. A dangerous encounter. That night, the car was back. Emily's hands trembled as she peeked through the curtains. It was the same car, parked in the same spot. Only this time, it wasn't empty. A figure sat behind the wheel, barely visible under the dim glow of the streetlight. Rex saw it too. He stood by the window, his body tense, his growl deeper than before. Emily's heart pounded. She couldn't ignore it anymore. She grabbed her phone and dialed 911. "There's a suspicious car outside my house," she whispered. "It's been here 2 nights in a row. I think someone's watching me." The dispatcher assured her an officer would patrol the area, but Emily knew she couldn't just sit and wait. Then, a sound made her blood run cold. The doorknob rattled. Emily's breath hitched. Someone was at her door. Rex lunged forward, barking ferociously. The first real bark Emily had ever heard from him. The sheer force of it shook the room. The person outside hesitated. Then, the sound of hurried footsteps echoed through the silence. Emily rushed to the window just in time to see the car's taillights vanish into the night. Rex remained by the door, his body rigid, his chest heaving. Emily knelt beside him, her hands shaking as she stroked his fur. "You saved us," she whispered. "You protected me." He didn't move, but for the first time since she had adopted him, Rex wasn't just afraid anymore. He was ready to fight back. This section builds suspense while revealing Rex's past and introducing a new danger. Let me know if you need any adjustments. Scene final, a new beginning. The next morning, Emily woke with a sense of urgency. The events of the previous night still played in her mind. The mysterious car, the rattling doorknob, Rex's fierce reaction. Whoever was looking for him wasn't going to stop. She knew she couldn't stay here. With a determined breath, she grabbed her duffel bag and began packing. She didn't have a solid plan, only the certainty that she needed to get Rex out of danger. He had spent too much of his life running, living in fear. Not anymore. Rex sat near the door, watching her movements carefully. His usual wariness was still there, but something in him had changed. He was no longer just waiting for something bad to happen. He was waiting for her direction. She knelt down beside him, placing a hand gently on his back. "We're leaving, buddy. Somewhere safe, somewhere they'll never find you." His ears twitched, but he didn't pull away. He trusted her. Emily quickly gathered the essentials: food, water, blankets. She threw on a hoodie, tugged on a pair of sneakers, and clipped Rex's leash onto his collar. The moment she opened the front door, he stiffened, sniffing the air. The street was quiet. No suspicious cars, no lingering figures. But Emily didn't trust it. "Come on," she whispered, leading Rex toward her car. He hesitated for only a second before hopping into the back seat. She had expected him to be nervous, but instead, he settled onto the blanket she had laid out, his golden brown eyes watching her through the rearview mirror. She smiled, even as her heart pounded. Good boy. Then, without looking back, she pulled out of the driveway and headed toward the one place she knew they would be safe. Finding peace hours later, they arrived at the countryside. The drive had been long and tense, but as Emily turned onto the dirt road leading to her friend's secluded farmhouse, a wave of relief washed over her. There were no city lights, no crowded streets, just open fields, tall trees, and silence. Rex lifted his head, sniffing the crisp air through the cracked window. His body was still tense, but his eyes were alert, curious. Emily parked and turned to him. "This is home now. What do you think?" He didn't react right away, but when she opened the car door, he stepped out cautiously, his paws pressing into the soft earth. The wind ruffled his fur, carrying scents he had never known before: grass, fresh air, the distant sound of birds chirping. Emily knelt beside him, unclipping his leash. "Go on, Rex. You're free." For a moment, he just stood there. Then, something incredible happened. He ran, not out of fear, not to escape, but for the first time in his life, he ran because he could. Emily watched, tears welling in her eyes, as Rex sprinted across the open field. His legs stretched, his ears flopped in the wind, his tail wagged freely behind him. And then, he barked. It was a different bark than before, not one of fear or defense, but uninhibited joy. Emily let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. He was finally free. A new life. That night, as Emily sat on the farmhouse porch with a warm cup of tea in her hands, Rex curled up beside her. He wasn't pressed against the wall, wasn't hiding in the shadows. He was lying next to her, his head resting against her leg, his breathing slow and content. She stroked his fur gently. "You're safe now, Rex. No one will ever hurt you again." He didn't move, but a soft sigh escaped him, as if he understood every word. Emily smiled through her tears. She had rescued him, yes, but in a way, he had saved her too. For the first time in a long time, neither of them had to run. Neither of them had to be afraid. They had found home. This section provides a strong emotional conclusion, wrapping up Rex's journey while reinforcing themes of trust, healing, and freedom. Let me know if you'd like any modifications.